Looks like we're still continuing this point, at least right now. And we would like to continue heroically in discussing further things that we have discussed in the connections of the Mahayanist path. When somebody begins to realize the notion between the differences or the oppositions or the inspirations, on the other hand, that plays between the Hinayana and the Mahayana together or put together, there's not very much problem, or there's furthermore, actually, inspirations begin to take place. Having become a refugee, as Hinayanists approach solitude and self-discipline, individual salvation, begin to bring a sense of public salvation, begin to take place. Salvation begin to take place. Public salvation is that of the Mahayanist approach, obviously, when somebody actually transplanted the bodhicitta in their hearts, in their mind, which is a waking state of mind, is actually transplanted in individual's mind fully and thoroughly, properly, that you become part of the bodhicitta principle, that is to say, that this point onward, that you are a awake person, you can't be fallen asleep anymore, that you are awake already. Because you're awake already, therefore you could be thought to be awake at the same time, which is actually taking the bodhisattva vow. Principle is that there is some sense of gut level taking place already in our existence as already evolved Buddhist from the Hinayana to the Mahayana already. And at that level, of course, I should be very careful again and again this point, of course, by saying that we should be very careful and understanding to the idea of a theism and a non-theism, which I'm sorry to bring it back again and again. It's a pain in the ass to a lot of you, and I wish that I would just bypass that little area. But unfortunately, being honest Buddhist like myself and thorough Buddhist, indoctrinated and well-trained, well-educated in the Buddhist world, and a completely recycled Buddhist. And every blood, every item, and every molecule in my system is Buddhist. So I can't just afford to be bullshitting with anybody. And more than that we'll be talking about trying to get away from spiritual materialism. So I had to be honest with you, and I think I have been so far honest as much as I can, if you permitting, and we go on. So the notion of theism and non-theism is somewhat painful in some sense. Even the bodhisattva level, much more so, that when we begin to talk about transplanting bodhicitta or Buddha mind in our hearts, in our minds, and awakening what we have already and bring them all together, is becoming very problematic. If we have a theistic situations getting there together in a way which is like inviting foreign germs into our heart while we're having heart surgery, heart transplantation, You don't want to do that. It's very messy. That foreign germ is not a particularly heretical belief or anything of that nature, but it is a very simple matter that where we actually wanted to attain enlightenment on the spot, on existence, and we want to be witnessed by ourselves, and also we want to be witnessed by our friends, and watched over so that we can actually celebrate that our attainment of enlightenment on the spot. It is like a bicentennial hoo-ha. And that could never happen. And you cannot actually experience your own attainment of enlightenment on the spot. Or for that matter, your friends can't take part in it. The wake concept is wake. Like a very simple analogy, when we are asleep, and then we wake. Of course we wake, but we're woken up by ourselves. If one by one friends begin to walk into our bedroom and begin to wake us up, we're already woken up. So we can't actually celebrate actual wake at all. You'll be woken up already. And you try to make polite conversations or be pissed off to your friends while you barge into my bedroom while I'm having a nice, good sleep. So wake had to be personal experience. Actually, personally, one has to be woken by oneself and actually woken up on the moment, on the spot, precisely and basically, that you have been woken up on the spot by yourself. Otherwise, you don't experience a sense of being awake at all. When you've been waking up with someone else, that's very druggy, complainatory. Oh, come on. What is this? Is this already late? Won't you let me sleep a little bit more? That's not really a sense of wake. You're not really awake. If you really wake, you're really awake, needless to say. That notion of wake actually contains the notion of that you have something wake ability in you already. Otherwise you may drop dead, become jellified, vegetable. Since that you are a wakeable person already, therefore you could be woken up, which is the Tathagata Garbha, or the Buddha mind inside you. The wakeability is already in you, already. And let us discuss that wakeability is what it's all about, that thing that we are discussing. It is not very much. It's a very simple one. There is some sense of wake and some sense of softness, which is to say non-aggression. And also, we mustn't forget, there's some sense of freshness taking place at that particular point. Some sense of freshness, real freshness. The cool air, as well as a sense of wake, and sense of sympathetic attitude. And usually we fall asleep. We want to go on sleeping because we don't like our world. We want to escape and get prescription from our doctors for sleeping pills so that I could escape my world as much as I could. Then I could wake up suddenly, take a shower, go to job, and fight with the world, and come back, eat dinner, whatever, go to sleep, take pill. But in this case, it's a more civilized approach than that. It's a Buddhist way, it's very civilized. Actually, it's delightful. But please don't get tripped out of that. You have to be careful on that. There's something very personal about the whole thing. It's nothing so much that it imposed on you as rules and regulations, what to do, what not to do, and all the rest of it. But a simple, straightforward situation, how to celebrate one's life. The notion of wake, it seems to be full of wake. If we are awake, we are full of our awakeness. Am I making any sense? If you're awake, you are full of wake. Is that clear? Yeah? No? No? Does that make any sense? Well, I will go on. Try my best. In awakeness. If you wake, you awake, right? I hope you understand that much. If you wake, you awake, right? So, if you wake, you awake. And then what? Nothing happens. Just simply go on with the blah, 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 whatever you have. So what? Nothing happens. Actually, nothing happens. But then we are not talking about that nothing happening is not trying to correlate with the notion of shunyata. And the shunyata principle is not so much of talking empty wallet. The shunyata principle is basically the idea of you are awake. You understand that already. And then what comes next? So what? Full of questions. Possibilities of all kinds. But then again, that doesn't mean anything at all. At that moment where you catch yourself between that and this, and begin to realize that who you are is not particularly certain on the spot. You begin to catch yourself between the 2 points, which is not really a 2 point, it's a 1 point, which is splintered already in 2 points. And you begin to realize there's this or that possibilities of it, and on the other hand, it might be so, but so what? It's time to find out. And let us have a good time with that, whatever it is. And all those little speculations take place in our head, in our mind. And at the same time, the whole thing is total bullshit, which is the Buddhist cause nothing. Absence of bullshit, which could be very full with all kinds of further sanities, further vibrant situations with all kinds. But it's basically absence of bullshit. And translated that in the more traditional word, that absence of bullshit, absence of a conceptualized mind, is actually conceptualized mind is equivalent of that idiom we use in America these days is bullshit, is conceptual mind. Or if we could use another vocabulary, which is known as trip, trip. You're tripping out on something, and you're conceptualizing, and you're bullshitting, are all part of the same language from their point of view, conceptualizing to the situations, conceptualizing to try to prove whether you exist or the others exist, and conceptualizing whether you exist, the others exist. Therefore, we could create some sense of a mutual game, joke. And that is the heavy load, or what is precisely known as spiritual materialism. Spiritual materialism, which is absence in the notion of shunyata situation, absence of those particular kind of trips that we try to hang on to, and we try to survive from those particular process. And by surviving, we could generate further games and greater games of all kinds, and we will feel great, somewhat temporarily great and fantastic, and eventually feel very grave. And we begin to catch up with our own trips, our own materialism, and our own problems of all kinds, and things are not particularly super anymore. And these things begin to catch up with us, which is called a depression, and hit back from the spiritual materialism. And then at that point we begin to complain the government or the organization, our parents, our schooling systems, and our welfare systems, everything you can handle. We begin to make a gigantic complaint about the whole thing. And we are known as the protesters, underground, or whatever, leftist or the rightist or whatever you have, blah, blah, blah. Actually, at that point, if you understand the whole thing, you could create ideal society, which is not so ideal, but it's right society. At that point, you could put down all the trips and just be vacant and open. And the vacant and open, as I said already, does not necessarily mean to say no money in the wallet approach of emptiness, shunyata, but simply clear, fantastic space and such freshness can take place. It's beautiful. It's real. It has been real for 2,500 years in the past, and it is still real. And we better take that reality, old-aged real, still up to date, real, and the Shunyata principle is very real at that point. So no trips, no conceptualized approaches taking place in our system. That's the basic notion of Shunyata. Which doesn't mean to say negate everything, that there's no room, there's no house, there's no roof, there's no speaker, there's no audience, there's no carpet, there's no television camera, whatever. Those things are just simple kind of bourgeois Zen joke that has developed in America by a lot of people. And people got killed on those dangerous bourgeois Zen words. And lots of people commit suicide. They think it's safe. Since there's nobody there, therefore why not just give up the whole thing? And a lot of people get creating all kinds of messy job in their universe, their world. Well, however, that's a different topic. We're not up to discussing politics at this point. But it actually comes in. If we begin to talk about the notion of compassion and our care for society, our care for the world, and that automatically comes in, but it doesn't have to be heavy-handed particularly. A notion of shunyata, from their point of view, is no conceptualization, and no particular reality is taking place other than your own trip. And your own trip is therefore also, at the same time, questionable. Who are you? What are you? What is this? What is that? Well, if you try to pinpoint and trying to find out who are you, what we are, what really is actually happening, it is very hard to pinpoint, not so much that you are under-intelligent, you are so stupid, therefore you couldn't find a smart answer. But at the same time, you could be very smart and very intelligent at the same time, but still not finding the basis of what it is all about. And who are you, what you are? It's a very fundamental question. It's not so much that the Buddhists took advantage of the stupid or the idiots. Therefore, the idiots couldn't explain what it's all about. Therefore, Buddhists are trying to say, well, let's call it shunyata. And it's nothing, and everything's fine. So let's the audience, the congregation is stupid. Therefore, let us make a statement. It seemed to be a safe statement. Oh no. Oh no. That's not quite the case. That the minds of the students of the Buddhists in the past have been so thorough and precise, in particularly discussing such questions like Shunyata principle, is a product of the students of the Hinayana discipline who thought so thoroughly, so precisely, and they've actually examined questions in their everyday life situations and how the world of psychology come along, or your particular mind has evolved at all. And by such analytical and precision, and aid by sitting practice of meditation a great deal, that finally they come to the conclusion of Shunyata principle, which is not so much of I can't understand, therefore there must be nothing. I do not understand anything happening, therefore there's nothing. Again, we are not talking about the empty pocket, empty wallet, but we are talking about simply experiencing things as they are, very precisely, fully precisely, as what's going on right now in our mind. And you have expectations for all kinds, that why the next word will come along, and how the next sentence will come along, how you be told the oriental truth of the shunyata, of all kinds of things like that, but actually that you're waiting. Nothing's happening. But full of everything at the same time. Finally, we could say that in order to understand the basic notion of Shunyata principle, is one has to realize some kind of sense of warmth is taking place in one's system. Along with that basic notion of Shunyata also can come along with some notion of humor. If you're serious and militant, as many of our Zen pioneers have been, who end up in committing suicide, a lot of them save their souls. Nothing happens beyond that. Nothing happens beyond that. The sense of vision and wake, as well as some sense of warmth. When you try to understand something like this, you can't be too harsh on yourself. You can't be too harsh on yourself. You have to be more gentle and loving to oneself. And when you begin to realize that notion of loving and gentleness in yourself, at the same time you begin to give up the notion of trying to find out the real truth. And there is the real notion of when Shunyata experience begin to happen. Give up hope of trying to understand something, and also at the same time having some sense of sympathy to yourself. There is a moment of gentleness and a moment of non-caring, which is basically an inheritance from the Hinayana discipline. Without that, there's no realization of Shunyata principle. And there's some readings being signed up for you people discussing the Madhyamaka principle and the rest of it, but I think at this point it becomes too much paraphernalia to discuss that metaphysical approach, since we have got somewhere which is very genuine and living Buddhist approach to Shunyata. You're welcome to ask questions if you like, please.